when we got to the motel, we stood right in front of the door, and I still remember we knocked on the door, and once the door was open, I was the very first person to go inside the motel room. As soon as I went inside, I grabbed the very first person, Mr. Horn. I grabbed him and I put 2 knives on his neck, and I told him not to move. I told him just like, don't move, don't do anything, let them take care of the business, and nobody's gonna get hurt. My friend number 1, the one who did the arguing, he jumped on the bed and he started attacking somebody's on the bed. Later, I found out that was the person who argued with him. While my other friend, number 2, he's walking around the room and he started, cussing, yelling at the victims for disrespecting him, disrespecting my friends, and they don't know how we are, who we are. And all of a sudden, I just heard a scream. And I heard friend number 1 ask friend number 2, now why did you stab him? And friend number 2 say, well, I want to give him a scar for him to remember for the rest of his life for not disrespecting people. And then around that time, I looked out the window and I saw a cop car pass by, and I alerted them. I was like, hey man, there's a cop outside, we gotta go. I remember I was the very first person who left the room. I went down to the parking lot, and seriously, I went down to the parking lot, I stood there and I asked myself, if I jump over the fence now, I can run away. Nobody know me, the victim don't even know me unless my friends give me up and I get away. Or I can stay here with my friends and be loyal. And stupid of me, I decided to stay. I was found guilty of all charges. They charged me murder and robbery, first-degree murder, and thank God the judge, instead of giving me life without the possibility of parole, the judge gave me 25 years to life. And the board decided that they was gonna grant me a parole suitability, but I still owe them a bunch of time, so they gave me a release day of 2023. I was happy because I'm okay. At least I was settled with the reality that I know when I'm gonna go home. Even if it's 12, 13 years, at least there's a chance that's for me to go home. I just gotta work a little bit harder. But the governor sees differently, and he reviewed my case, and he agreed with the board that I'm okay to be granted parole. But the governor see it was unnecessary for me to continue to be incarcerated for another 12 years. So the governor's ordered my immediate release from prison. And thank God he made that decision, because it charged me to carry some tasks. It's like a delegation. And ever since I got released, I have lived a life where I just can't let that decision die, because many lives are dependent on that decision. And thank God the governor did that. Not only that, it was a blessing to my family and myself, but it's beneficial to society and community.
You ever ask yourself, what if I get deported?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think about that question every single day when I'm free, because I came here with my family when I was 6 months old. I don't know nothing about me now. But the idea of going back to a country that having the feeling that you're an outcast because you were raised here, and the shame of things. You came over here as a refugee, which was shameful, and now you're incarceration, and now you're getting deported back to a country. That's the double shame. But for me, I think no matter where you're in life, what do you do makes the difference. I think that, say for instance, if I do eventually get deported, there's a foundation for Vietnamese here to utilize. And it's scary because I've been away from my family for 18 years. Now the thought of being taken away from them again And the thought of saying, for instance, my parents passing away and I can't be there, you know, that's the thought that I think about every single day. So I enjoy every moment with them. Every possible moment I can, I try to be closer to them. Even if it's a brief moment and I do get deported, they still have that memory of me being free. Stigmatized. When I first got released a year ago, I was in a transitional home in LA and going into a nonprofit which only deals with the majority of Hispanics, African American, and whites. You know, they offer help, but for you being Asian, you don't feel comfortable. You don't fit in with that population. Or say, for instance, now you're faced with work, but because you can't work without a permit, and the permit takes a very long, extensive time to get, you're actually in limbo. Being an ex-con, you get frowned upon. Everywhere you go, you can't voice your opinion, you can't tell your life story, and if you do, they ask you, well, what have you been doing all these years? You actually don't want to tell them that I've just been released. You know, and now I'm relying on family's help to find employment. But it's actually hard because you're holding this inside and you can't voice it out freely because people are so, especially with the Asian community, they're so traditional that they can't see that people make mistakes. But the mistakes it's sometimes fortunate because they were so young that they don't understand what was right and wrong. Now they're given an opportunity as a grown man to try to fix something, they're still being frowned upon. You know, it's me, myself, I look at myself as a shameful. But how do I overcome that? By giving back what I can. And means doing non-profit, helping the next generation, and just to steer the Asian community into a better place. Because there's so much of us that's getting out, it's a problem. But the problem is, we're here, we're not going nowhere until we get deported. So why not help us to help everybody else? The community, we're a part of the community now. And sometimes that pride, sometimes that ashamedness prevent us from telling our life story and the struggles that we've been through. You know, it's not easy for an individual to live decades and actually rehabilitate, actually know what's right or wrong now, actually understand what's important in life, which is family, your community. And being that I have the opportunity of, as a free man today, every single moment I try to give back.
Okay, so this is my colleague Jacqueline Dan.
Đây là người cùng làm việc với tôi, cô tên là Jacqueline Dan.
Thank you all for being here tonight. The reason why we're here tonight is to educate and to empower the community about the new immigration laws that have been administered by the new Trump presidency.
What I wanted to say is that regardless of why you came here, maybe you have a loved one who is an immigrant and you are worried for them.
So what I wanted to talk about is President Trump's focus on people with deportation orders. Because in our community, in the Vietnamese community, there are at least 12,000 people who have deportation orders, but are still in this country. So that means that they have been to court and an immigration judge has signed for their deportation. But for the longest time, Vietnam refused to accept any of these people back into their country. That meant that these people were detained by immigration in jails for long periods of time, often decades.